Today we're going to be talking about analyzing nonfiction. We start with nonfiction because it is the one that is least familiar to most people. When you're reading nonfiction, you might be tempted to mirror the original style or structure of the argument, but remember you're creating your own argument, so you don't necessarily want to do that. You also don't want to summarize the argument and just tell us what the other person is arguing. That doesn't actually get into critical analysis, and so we want to avoid that as much as possible. That doesn't mean we can't summarize a little bit in order to put our readers in the same place that we are in understanding the text, but that can't be the only thing we do. We also don't want to argue the same point or agree or disagree. It is not up to you to necessarily disagree with a nonfiction argument. You're really thinking about the tools and the motifs and the different things, the techniques that particular author used to make that argument. And again, text can be anything. So it can just simply be the creator of the text. I said author, and I will oftentimes revert to a written text in my head, but we have lots of options available to us. You definitely want to construct your own argument, and we start by immersing ourselves in the text. We want to look at it and look at it again. We want to annotate, which is to make observations and underline things and circle things. We look at what is emphasized and how that influences our understanding of the piece. We want to look at what is absent. Sometimes absences can speak as loud as things that are emphasized. And then you have to think about what claim is being made and what does that claim suggest about the moment and time and the audience that would help better elucidate the situation. Or if you remember from 111, that's called the kairos. And we think about that in a new and more applicable way to this critical analysis in helping us understand the context. When we want to make meaning, we have to construct our own argument about a text. So we look for anything that can help us do that, like holes in logic or biases and consequences from those biases. And we can also use repetitions and allusions. I always like to reference the inaugural speech from President Obama in 2008 because he makes a lot of allusions to the New Testament. Most presidents would allude to the Old Testament as a way of uniting a lot of different faiths, like Muslims and Jews and Christians, who all draw from similar parts of the Old Testament or similar ancestries. But Obama used the New Testament, and one of the reasons that may have contributed to that decision was a lot of controversy surrounding whether or not he himself was Muslim based on his name, and a lot of people were pulling that as a reason for being skeptical of his presidency. But I think that allusion to the New Testament was in part his attempt to suggest his own immersion in Christianity. So that would be an interesting thing to think about. Basically, you're looking for things and asking why they are there and what they do to help us better understand that particular text. When you develop your original thesis, you have those observations, and then you say, okay, what are they doing there? Why do they matter? In the discussion board that I've set up for thesis work, I've given you an example of how we might approach modest proposals, observations that we've made, and then ask a question that helps lead us to a thesis. And your original thesis can focus on all sorts of things, and here are some that I've listed for you as well. When you support your research, when you support your thesis, you're going to have primary research from the text, which means you're going to need quotations and textual evidence. When you then write your paper, you're probably going to want to include secondary research, which is parallel sources that are sources that may not be exactly on that particular text. So for instance, if you use the bulletin board from the previous presentation, you're not going to find any sources about bulletin boards. You might, but I doubt it. But you might find sources about Milligan's changing demographics, or you might find sources about small liberal arts colleges and their emphasis on athletics. And you can use contextual research, which is things about Milligan, or you can use things about small liberal arts colleges, which would be parallel resources, which are not about Milligan, but they're about similar institutions. And you can use primary documents, which would be the actual admission numbers and things like that from Milligan's fall semester. Okay, so with a modest proposal, there's some background things that you might want to know. It's satire, it's Jonathan Swift, it's 18th century, it's Ireland, England. Maybe you need those things, maybe you don't, but it can help situate you just a little bit so that you're not making false claims about the text, which are important. And here, if I just looked at a quick database search, these are some of the ideas that are in journals, so that there's a disconnect between the narrator and the writer, and that the rhetoric and the structure is a model for students. Understanding Swift's thoughts on population, that he thought there should not be fewer people, but more opportunities for those people. So lots and lots and lots of people have written about a modest proposal. And part of the reason we're doing it this way, we're looking at modest proposal and a bulletin board, is to show you that you can have ideas about things that have been around for a long time. You just have to work a little harder. And you can have ideas about things that generally no one would write about, like a bulletin board. So as you read and annotate, we are going to work through this. We're not going to share our observations and put them on the board, obviously, but we are going to make meaning together, and we're going to work through that with the discussion board option. And we're going to review the idea of the thesis process, or the thesis formula, sort of, that's on the discussion board as well, where you have your categories or your observations followed by a really strong verb, followed by the meaning or the assertion, the hypothesis that you are making yourself. And here are some examples from last year's students. The tension in Swift's language implicates even a modern audience in the dehumanization of the poor. By equating capitalist consumption to cannibalism, Swift offers a stinging indictment of the middle class as well as the rich. And then there are a couple thesis statements there for the bulletin board as well. Like the bulletin board's emphasis on athletics likens college membership in team sports as an effort to create community. There's obviously a word missing there as well. But the point is, we can make thesis statements, and we're going to do some model thesis statements together. These might help you. You can see that here is the observation, and then here's a strong verb, followed by the whole idea here is to make a new claim about modest proposal. So today we're going to continue to work on these things and prepare ourselves to move into Essay 1. You can begin to think about what nonfiction piece you would like to work on if you were working on one, but you do not have to choose nonfiction. We're going to go through 2 or 3 different styles before it's all finished. So let's get to work.